Howdy, folks. Welcome to the February edition of Cattle Trails Showcase. I'm Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate. Mighty glad to be your host. Today, we're going to be zooming to the Chisholm Trail Museum in Kingfisher, Oklahoma. We like to begin with a trivia question, as you know. So here's our Western trivia question for today. In the 1960s, there was a television show named Rawhide that was about a big cattle trail across the central U.S. One of the characters was the ramrod for the outfit, and his character was named Rowdy Yates. So the question for you to answer in the chat is, what was the name of the actor who played Rowdy Yates on the TV show Rawhide? And if you get the answer right, Dennis Katzenmeyer is going to buy you a free sarsaparilla. No, just kidding about that part. But feel free to, there you go, enter the name of the character in the chat. The purpose of our Cattle Trails Showcase is to continually highlight the community's historical elements, museums, and other attractions along the Chisholm Trail or the Western Cattle Trail. The showcase is brought to you by the International Chisholm Trail Association. The officers are on the screen. Dennis Katzenmeyer is our president. Michael Grauer is vice president. Nancy Lawrence is secretary. And Mary Lou Rivers is treasurer. And Lonnie Steben is our showcase chair. So today we're zooming to the Chisholm Trail Museum and Horizon Hill in Kingfisher, Oklahoma, which is located northwest of Oklahoma City. We're joined by Dr. Jason Harris, who is executive director of the museum. Dr. Harris earned his undergrad degrees in museum studies at the Museum of Central Oklahoma and his PhD in history from Oklahoma State University. He's been executive director of the Chisholm Trail Museum in Kingfisher for 4 years. So we welcome Dr. Jason Harris. And Jason, please tell us about the Chisholm Trail Museum.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for having me today. The whole Dr. Harris is a relatively new thing that actually just occurred in December. So I'm still getting used to it. Well, they asked me to come on and kind of talk a little bit about our site. And I'm going to show you some pictures and kind of explain it. So I'm going to share my screen for you. And there we go. It should be up for you. Can everybody see it okay? Perfect. So I've been at the Chisholm Trail Museum for 4 years, and it is an Oklahoma Historical Society site. There we go. It was built in the 1960s. And I like to say, of all the Chisholm Trail museums along the trail that I've been to, it has the least amount about the Chisholm Trail for many of them that I've seen so far. But we have a plan for that. I always like to start off with what our upcoming events are, just because everybody's always paying attention at the beginning. So our next big event happens to be next month. We have an annual Chuck Wagon Gathering. It's our fundraiser and our big community event. It features live entertainment, music, demonstrations, 8, 10, 12 chuck wagons at a time. And of course, that picture there on the left side of your screen happens to be my son, who cooks on chuck wagons with me on a bunch of different occasions throughout the year. So if you'd like to know more about that, you can just reach out to me. So we decided a few years ago to help make our site more viable, to bring some of the trail history in, but also to bring in some of Oklahoma's unique industry and innovation. We were going to rebrand the museum and do a major renovation. So I'm going to kind of go through where we are and what we're going to be and let you in on the secret, because it hasn't even gone out to the wider public yet. So we're going to drop part of our name off, and instead of being the Chisholm Trail Museum, we're going to just be the Chisholm, and we're going to be where industry meets the frontier. So we're going to combine some of the old with the new, and we're going to connect to our old past, being along the trail, but also bring in some of those unique stories of innovation, spirit, commerce, and trade, and try and flesh out how it all ties together for the state, and then some of the trail's legacies and the development of the ranching industry in Oklahoma, etc. So we have a new mission statement. I'm going to read it to you real quick. The mission of the Chisholm is to collect, preserve, and share the history and culture of Oklahoma's innovative spirit, commerce, trade, and industry. And so those collective items are going to bring pretty cool things to our museum, I think. So here's the museum when it was built in the 1960s. We actually sit in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So if you haven't been, you'll think your GPS is taking you the wrong way, because you get off the highway and you start driving into a neighborhood and you're passing yards, and then all of a sudden you're at this building that looks like it might be a 1950s elementary school. But that's our building under construction, and of course the grand opening. And they've added on to the museum multiple times over the years as they tried to expand and bring in new things. But I really like that picture of the grand opening, because, you know, you kind of get a sense of, for smaller communities like Kingfishers and others, the cultural institutions in them, no matter what their topics are, have always been important to the community. And you know, we still are to some extent, but as we go, that sort of slips away a little bit more and a little bit more every year. And we're hoping that this big change for our site will help us re-engage with our immediate community and the surrounding areas. So this is what we look like today. Like I said, we look a little bit like a elementary school in the middle of a neighborhood, and they put a new front on it to try and dress it up. But I'm going to show you where we're going. Our site features the main museum, but it also features a number of historical buildings. That image there on the left is the territorial governor's house. Abraham Jefferson C. lived in that house for about a decade. When he built it, he had high aspirations that Kingfisher would be the state capital of Oklahoma. Of course, it didn't quite turn out that way, but the preservation efforts to save that house in the 1960s and keep it from being torn down is really what led the community to build the Chisholm Trail Museum. It and the museum sit across from each other, and the group that came together to save the house ultimately built the museum and also saved some other important structures. That picture on the right happens to be Kingfisher's first bank, and it is the only wooden timber frame bank from the territorial period that's still in existence. We also have the Dalton brothers' mother's cabin, which was brought in from her homestead, along with a few other historical buildings to create a pioneer village. So this is kind of what some of our exhibit spaces look like now. There on the left, part of our Chisholm Trail exhibit. On the right, we've started to bring in some stuff that talks about Oklahoma business and commerce. I don't know if any of you know it, but the TG&Y company, Ray Young, who was one of the three founders, happened to be from Kingfisher. And the reason for that kind of broad switch to commerce and industry was Kingfisher has this unique tie to a whole bunch of different companies. Sam Walton was born in Kingfisher. Of course, they moved to Arkansas, and that's where he started Walmart from. But when TG&Y closed in the 1980s, the majority of the administrative staff went from TG&Y to Walmart, and that's when Walmart started to explode as a large company. Coleman Lantern came to Kingfisher, Oklahoma to sell his first lanterns. He didn't think anyone would buy them at first, so he made lease arrangements where you actually would lease the lantern for a certain period of time, and if you liked it, you kept it. And if you didn't, he would take it back. And then one of the founders from Sonic, the drive-in that everyone's probably familiar with, happens to have started just outside of town. So what we've done really as we've prepared for this big change is we've started to develop education programs, outreach programs, and opportunities to engage with the public that tie into our new mission that looks at the trades, so that as we close for our renovation, we're still able to do community engagement. So our two big events here at the museum each year are our Chuck Wagon Gathering and then our traditional Trades Day. And the gentleman on the left happens to be Cody Mobley. He's the director of the Fort McCavitt Historic Site in Texas. And he travels all around the region doing wet plate photography. And we're one of the sites he does his trade at. We have all sorts of other activities. We have coopers and cooks and dressmakers and flint knappers and leather workers and all sorts of different traditional trades that come in for that day in the fall. We do any number of school programs, and we're going to shift those to outreach when we close. Then once again, there's my son, because I like to think if you give kids enough information to like history, they'll make a connection to it and they'll enjoy it. And I got into the museum field because I was in a school program when I was in 7th grade, and I really liked it. And so me doing school programs has wrangled him in, and now some of my other children as well. So here's where we're going. It's a little bit different look from that elementary school in the neighborhood. We're going to redo the facade and do major construction and architectural change to the building. Bring the building up to date for modern collection standards so that we can take better care of the vast number of artifacts and images we have. Give you a good sense of what we're going to look like. So it's a big project. Nobody probably cares about this part as much as I do. But right now we have a whole bunch of maintenance needs. It's nearly $700,000 worth of repairs we need to make to the building. And that was part of the impetus for going ahead and making the changes. If we're going to spend $700,000 to fix things that already exist, why not put the bigger investment in and create something new? So we're going to do about this has not been updated for COVID. We're going to do about a $2.5 million renovation to the project or to the facility. So when we do it, it'll bring us up to date. It'll be a Smithsonian quality building with engineering in place for the mechanical systems to really take care of collections. We're building in better public spaces and plazas and new interpretive exhibits that are more engaging than some of the things we have, where we just have a lot of stuff on display and there's no real information on what it is because it's been sitting in the same place in the building for sometimes 20 and 30 years. So we've broken our project down into 4 phases. Phase 1, we're already in, and we're doing architectural planning, engineering, and some of our quiet fundraising. Phase 2, we're going to implement collection storage project where we redo our workshop. We turn it into a collection storage facility. Gives us the opportunity to move out of our building for the renovation because we have to completely vacate it because we're going to completely gut the thing. Phase 3 is the preservation and restoration work to our exterior buildings. We've already started where we've done our 2 log cabins, but that way we can go ahead and do the preservation work that's needed to all of our other historical buildings. And then the last phase is the main museum. Like I said, we're going to completely empty it. It's going back to the bare bones and getting rebuilt from the inside and outside into a brand new building, more or less. That gives you a little bit of a sense of what our facility looks like. We have about 18,000 square feet of exhibit space. We have a classroom, and then we have our 5 historical buildings on our side of the street. The territorial governor's house, the mansion, is actually on the other side of the street. So some of our big successes for the last year is securing some of the grants that were needed for that collections work. We were lucky enough to get $20,000 from a heritage preservation grant so that we could bring in shelving and start to prepare our building. Also, some of the local foundations have started to give us seed money. And I use this picture in particular because I'm actually pretty proud. You can't see it very well, and I can't get a good picture because of how it's set in storage right now. But there on the right, you can see our original cook shack. That cook shack was used on all sorts of wheat fields and farms from about 1898 all the way through the 1920s. It was the same family that went out and fed threshing crews and harvesters and all sorts of people as they made their way across the state doing wheat harvest. That same family actually has family members that are involved with one of the local community restaurants. And then, like I said, we're going to do renovation work to some of our outdoor buildings. You can kind of get a sense of what some of our buildings look like from those pictures on the bottom right, where, you know, the state has just deferred maintenance for a long time because of state budgets and income problems, etc. And now we're to the point where we really need to do some work to make sure these items last for decades to come. And we already talked a little bit about phase 4 being the final building. So here's kind of how we're going to reimagine the museum. When we talk about expanding it to be more than the Chisholm Trail, since we have very little on the trail itself, we're going to look at topics like agriculture in Oklahoma, business and commerce in Oklahoma, the energy sector in Oklahoma, aviation in Oklahoma, but we're also going to go back and we're going to look at the development of tribes, trade, and the frontier economy, and sort of how the whole idea of commerce and business developed in the West over time. Just a couple more pictures of some of the rough sketches of what some of the exhibit spaces are going to look like. And so I went through that pretty quick, but I wanted to give everyone the chance to ask me some questions about my facility, why we decided to move to a new theme, and just anything you'd like to know of Jason at all. So I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen so we can chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jason. This is a treat to kind of get an advanced view of the exciting future that you have planned for the Chisholm. $2.5 million project. Are you looking for a mix of state and private funds, or?
So we're looking for a mix of state and private funds. Right now we have about 450,000 in the bank. The community has already started to give. We've received a couple of seed gifts, and our county has already made an investment in the project. We actually have a request in with the state legislature this year that would bring about $1.8 million to the site. And we're starting to flesh out the rest of our private dollar gifts. We also established an endowment last year and have started it. We're trying to also match our endowment gifts as we build, so that once the museum's done, we've got about $2.5 million in our endowment for sustainability. And I saw Nancy asked, when do we think the project will be completed? It's an approximately 24-month project from the time construction starts till we're back in the building. We expect that we will close sometime next year to start removing the objects out of the building. We're going to do the collections portion of it later this year and get prepared to be able to close and actually start the project next year. So start to finish from the time we close will be approximately 3 years. So late 2025, early 2026.
So if we wanted to get a before and after view, we should get there.
You want to come see me this year? And you might want to come to the Chuck Wagon Gathering. So
anyone who wants to ask a question of Jason, feel free to unmute and ask, or you can post your question in the chat.
So one of the things I was asked to talk about was classroom efforts, how we engage students. My background is in museum education. That's what I've done the majority of my time. So I've worked with students in Oklahoma and Texas. I was at the Texas State Historical Association for a couple of years. And we offer a number of programs. Lots of museums have traveling education trunks, and we're no different. Right now we have 4. We have Cowboys and Cattle Drives, Tribes, Trade, and the Frontier Economy. We have one on the worst hard times that looks at the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma. And then we have one on fur trapping and trading in Oklahoma. And those are available for teachers to check out and use for free. The other thing we do is we have a couple of different outreach programs where we go to different schools. One is they can get like a living history character, just the singular individual. And we make sure with our living history that the stories and the antics that we use to engage the kids are pretty heavily vested in a historical truth. We don't want them going away with kind of a comedic version of history, or maybe, I don't know the best way to describe it. We want it to be entertaining, but we also want it to be based in fact. And then we also go out and set up a Chuck Wagon at schools and various community events in the region when requested. So that's what we do for outreach right now.
Jason, how many people come to your Chuck Wagon Gathering in a say ideal conditions?
So pre-COVID, we would run a couple thousand, which is a pretty good crowd for us. But with 10, 12 Chuck Wagons, live music, and the size of our event space and it being spread out over a day, it's actually not too bad. You feel like there's people there, but you don't feel like you're overwhelmed. The first year of COVID, we shifted and we did something interesting, and we did a come and go Chuck Wagon dinner, where people who wanted to stay could stay and people who didn't could pick up their meal to go, and it worked pretty well for us. And so this will be the first time where we have the full festival over the last 2 years. So I'm excited to see what happens. But the community response and the response from the greater museum area has been pretty good so far. We're selling tickets to the fundraiser dinner. We're getting a lot of interest, so I think it'll be a good day.
How many of those Chuck Wagons do you do in a year?
We only do one event a year at our site. We actually take the wagon that I use with various crews all over the place, a dozen times a year. We'll be in Texarkana for their Wagons for Warriors event in early March. We go across Oklahoma, Texas, and the immediate area. So, and then for our event, we bring in wagons from Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas. I've had wagons from as far away as South Dakota come to my event.
How many wagons does it take to feed 2,000 people?
Depends on how much you feed them. So we actually, the way I do my particular program here is we sell a set number of dinner tickets if you want a full meal, and we sell 200 tickets just for the dinner, and then a portion of the wagons cook that meal. The other wagons cook samples and they pass them out throughout the day. So we feed the majority of people who come, they get a sample of something or a couple samples from a couple different wagons. So there's things to do throughout the day, and that's how I break it up. Some of the other Chuck Wagon festivals and gatherings I help with do it different. Some of them, they do it all by tickets. Some of it, they do it all by demonstration and they pass things out. And I like to do both.
So how much does a meal ticket cost?
So meal tickets for our event are just $15. And then admission to the festival itself or samples is free.
There's a testimonial in the chat. Carla Burdick says the Chuck Wagon event is really good and the food is awesome.
Well, I appreciate that, Carla. She comes just about every time she gets the chance to.
Hey, Ron, I got a question.
Fire away.
When you do those programs, how much does it cost you to put that on, and how much do you generate in income from doing an event like that?
So the Chuck Wagon Gathering is about $12,000 of expense on our part to bring in the wagons, provide for the food stuff and musical entertainment, etc. My income varies depending on basically the sponsorships I get from the community and businesses. The dinner tickets, we make a couple $1,000s, which covers the food costs. But the reason we're able to do that is because the community wants to have events that bring outsiders to Kingfisher. And so they've always stepped up. And so generally for us, we will bring in $16,000 to $20,000 in revenue for an event that costs roughly $12,000. So we actually make it into the black.
Well, that's great. You're doing a good job on that. That's fantastic.
Jason, are there like prizes, or do you have competition?
So no, there are a lot of sites that have a competition for the wagons, and I choose not to.
Okay.
Part of it is I'm pretty picky about what wagons I bring in. I want to make sure that they're pretty good with how they represent Chuck Wagon cooking, even though some, they're not all historical interpreters. I've got some wagons that do things 1880s ways, but they know what they're doing. They're cooking at a festival for the public. But I don't want to try and run a competition when, there's times and places for those. And I know that that's a good way to get some people to come. But no, I've just kept it a gathering where we just get together and cook, and I don't give prize money. I pay each of my wagons a stipend, and everybody gets the same stipend.
Yeah, this is Steve Myers in Fort Worth. I've got another question for you. You said you worked with the Oklahoma Historic Commission.
So we have a society rather than a commission, but I know what you're talking about from being in Texas. Yeah.
Do you get, the CLG program, Certified Local Government?
So I do know the CLG program, and I tried to motivate Kingfisher to become a certified local government, but it wasn't in their interest. They decided.
They have a lot of good programs. I was the Tarrant County Historic Commission chairman for a number of years, and we worked with, there's 4 cities in the Tarrant County, which is Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and Grapevine. And they've really taken a good use of the grants that they received to do a lot of those projects.
So
And-
I will say, having worked in both states, Oklahoma and Texas are set up incredibly different. The Texas Historical Commission and the way they work within Texas is not the same at all as Oklahoma. It's like comparing apples and oranges. Our society functions differently. They do award money and stuff, but as far as the certified local government, there's only a few communities in Oklahoma that have applied. I think it's only 12, 15 communities. So,
Well, the CLGs are, I think it's available to all states, historic commissions. And, you have to join the CLG program, but, like I said, Texas is really taking advantage of the grants that you can get. It's also part of the National Park Service program that they have on grants for preservation.
Thanks, Steve. Other questions for Jason?
I was gonna ask, can we ask how much you pay, what the stipend that you pay these wagons to come in?
It varies each year depending on how much money I get in sponsorships.
Okay.
So anywhere from $600 to $1,000.
Okay.
Jason, what's a typical menu when the Chuck Wagon folks prepare a meal? Give us examples of the dishes.
So this year for the paid dinner, it'll be chicken fried steak, potato, beans, cobbler, and a drink. But then for the samples, we'll do things like spotted pup and cobblers and beef tips and rice and biscuits and beans and things like that so that we can pass them out.
Okay, I'll bite. What in the thunder is spotted pup?
So it's rice pudding. So you take a rice pudding, you add raisins to it, and as you cook it, they swell up and it looks a little bit like full ticks after they hydrate.
Wow, sorry I asked.
Well, that's okay. It's one of my favorites. I have a good recipe and I make it 5 gallons at a time. So that's a lot of rice pudding.
One of the other things, when we had the 150th anniversary of the Chisholm Trail in 2017, we had a website that was there in Oklahoma at the Duncan Museum.
Yeah, with Stacy.
Yeah. And she did a great job of putting information on there when your museum would be having a Chuck Wagon cook-off, or the one in Fort Worth they have. Somehow or another, we all need to get together on heritage tourism and come up with work as a group so that we can advertise all the programs that's going on in the 3 states, in Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And we need to get all the museums and all the groups involved on this project too, like we did back in 2017. Is it something you'd be interested in being part of?
Oh yeah, I'd be interested in being part of it. And I know, Stacy's no longer at the Heritage Center in Duncan, and Marcy's no longer at visiting it. And so there's been some new faces and new people. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. We had a Chisholm Trail 150 rack card, and that was just Oklahoma sites, but we had all worked collaboratively. And when we did, people were paying attention to it. And now that the 150th is sort of fizzled and everybody's looking on to the 100th anniversary of Route 66, we need to get back together.
Well,
I have to agree with that. Tom Hawk, lives in Maryland, and he's going to come visit Mary Lou and I in May. And one of the things he wanted was a list of the museums and libraries and places that have annual events so that he could contact them, because he is a performer and he would like to perform at these places. So if somebody wants to put that together, that would be awesome. I don't have the energy to do it, but I really think that is a need. And I wouldn't mind that. I mean, I didn't know your Chuck Wagon Fest was March 19th. Cowtown is doing a Wild West Days, and it's a 2.5-day thing, and they're going to have Chuck Wagon meal too, kind of like what you're doing, but it's in September. Again, we all need to know these things so we can put them on our calendars. I would love to go to some of these things if I know ahead. So I have to wholeheartedly agree. If somebody wants to put that together, I would sure send it out to people, but I don't want to be the one putting it together.
Well, it's a great point. And in 2017, the International Chisholm Trail Association website had a really comprehensive listing, and similarly, there's still info on the different communities on the site. But that's, I think, part of Dennis's vision for the future too, is we can upgrade that website and get back to the point of populating that site with these current events. Couple of really good suggestions in the chat. Dwayne has noted that he and others belong to the Oregon California Trail Association, and they could promote events on their e-news. And Carla referenced the Red Carpet Country's Oklahoma Chisholm Trail Guide. So I think you're really making some great points here.
I would like to make a comment at this point too, is Ron, thank you for that input, but that was part of the reason for our International Chisholm Trail Association website, was to entertain all that materials. The problem that we have had is we had what I'm gonna call it, a manager, a director to handle that website, to handle our social media. He has resigned from us. So we don't really have a person or a source in place to really accommodate that, but we would like to be the place to go to share everybody's events and activities and what's going on. It's just, we need to have the wherewithal to get that accomplished.
Another thing is, the person who would take that project on shouldn't have to go search where these things are. We need to get the people who are actually putting these events on to contact that person, because it's a lot of work to go searching people's websites and finding out when their activities are. That can be daunting too, because I have tried to put something together and I get on there and I think, oh, this is the date, and I look at my calendar and that was 6 years ago. You know, they don't update their website, so you don't even, and you think, oh, May 19th, that's a Sunday. Nope, that's a Wednesday, because that was several years ago. So that's a chore too, to get the people who are putting these things on, like yourself, Jason, and Cowtown and whoever, to put those, to send that information on with some graphics.
And we want our association, that is the International Chisholm Trail Association, to be in a position where we can support the local museums and promote those events far and wide, using every channel
Right.
we
I've
can
been-
come up with.
I've been watching, my understanding is that this monthly Zoom has only started in the early 2021.
Mhm.
And for some lucky, very fortunate reason, I got put on the distribution list for this monthly Zoom in the spring of last year. It took me only a couple of these Zoom presentations to realize that I was looking at a golden opportunity to learn about where there might be performing opportunities. I've been performing cowboy and western music for almost 15 years, And there are very few performing opportunities back here east of the Mississippi. So I've also been very fortunate to have Nancy and Mary Lou invite me out in May to explore this very issue of where there are museums, where there are celebrations on the Chisholm Trail in Kansas and Oklahoma, so they're going to take me around, and hopefully one of my things that I will be able to do once I've done that is to write an article for the Western Way, which is the magazine of the International Western Music Association, in order to point out that there are performing opportunities along the Chisholm Trail, along the Western Trail. I don't know that there is a similar kind of organization or opportunities on the Goodnight Trail, but over the last several months, I have read extensively on the Chisholm Trail and the Western Trail and the Goodnight Trail, which has been quite an education for me. But I'm interested in finding out the locations and the dates of museums and of celebrations to find out if there are performing opportunities. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to perform at all of them, but making other cowboy and Western musicians and poets aware of these celebrations or these opportunities, I think is very important.
Well, that's clearly another important role that the ICTA can play. Are there other questions for Jason?
Yeah, I have. Right now here in Fort Worth, I've gone around to the retailers and talked to the Convention and Visitors Bureau people. And the cowboy is thriving here in Fort Worth with the movie 1883 and Yellowstone. And if you go down in the stockyards on the weekend, it is packed. In night, you can't. They close the street off because there's so many people down there to see the rodeo and to shop at all the stores they have down there. So now is a good time to really start promoting, the Western, the cowboy life, and the history of the American cowboy. And I've been trying to get RFD channel to get involved. And I've gone down there several times and dropped off information and talked to different people. And I think it would be great if we could get them as a backer on our project. I keep talking to people down there, but not stepped up yet to be part of the group. So I'm still working on that.
We appreciate that greatly. Any other questions for Jason? Jason, thank you. Round of applause, virtually at least, for Dr. Jason Harris and the exciting work. We're excited to learn about what you're doing, and we look forward to the realization of the Chisholm as your new vision comes about.
I appreciate it. And like I said, we're just now getting to the point where we're able to share kind of where we're going and why. And you get to be one of the first groups that I really get to talk with it about outside. But if you're interested in the future, I'd be willing to come back and maybe live stream a portion of maybe one of our education programs or something like that. So you can kind of see what we do on that sort of front, or at least let you record it and talk about it if you'd like to do something like that in the future. So
we appreciate that offer, and we look forward to working with you as things move forward.
Thank you all.
let's talk about next month. And for that, we have a special opportunity upcoming, and I'll turn to our showcase chair, Lonnie Stephen. Lonnie?
Thank you, Ron. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Jason, that was great. And as being the program chair, and we're getting a lot of good suggestions, and we rotate from state to state between the 3 states, but we are at the point that we have displayed a lot of the museums, and Ron knows we've talked about how do we kind of spread this out and engage in other areas and get the public interest. And these was just a great discussion this morning about, not everybody's into the living history, but some people, the younger people, we got to figure out how we bring them into that. And I think you're doing a great job, and you're right on target with what you're doing there, Jason. So I applaud you for that. But next month, we're going to kind of have a little different approach. And with permission of the Best of America by Horseback, which is RFD and Cowboy Channel, program that airs, I think, 2:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays a lot of times. And what Tom C. is, he has now retired, and Dale Shields, who happens to be from Kansas, is now the person that organizes the trail rides. So next month, we're actually going to take an experience, and it goes back to 2019, a trail ride from Caldwell, Kansas to Wichita, Kansas, and experience life on the trail, not in the way of a cattle drive, but with a trail ride. And what are some of the sites? You'll see some of the like native grassland that's been untouched since the original trail days, and hopefully everybody will enjoy it. So that'll be the March presentation. And then I'm working now, and so and Steve's giving me some good ideas. If you have ideas for future programs, I'm trying to put together the list for this year. So Ron, that's about it for me.
Thank you, Lonnie. And Best of America by Horseback. I mean, there was a reference to RFD earlier. Great idea. We need to connect with them any way that we can. That show is filmed literally all over the country, but they chose this particular location because of the Chisholm Trail.
Right.
And it's an extremely well put together, high quality video production. So you want to make sure you join us. So our Cattle Trails Showcase, as always, will fall on the second Friday of each month. So for next month, that would be Friday, March 11, 2022 at 10 a.m. Central Time. President Dennis will be presiding over a board meeting for the International Trail Association. It will be held on Zoom. We're going to stay right on this link, and at 11 o'clock, we are going to be having a board meeting. If anyone cares to join us, we'll stop the recording for our Cattle Trails Showcase. But if anyone would like to join us, you're welcome to stay on the link. With that, I'll close this part of the program. This is Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate, saying thanks for taking time to join us in this place, and come on back next month for our Cattle Trails Showcase. Happy trails.
Is Tom Hawk still there?